Map 2 now, and game number 1 did not disappoint in its, quite frankly, expected awesomeness. It was brilliant, and it made me very happy. Now on map number 2, are we going to see a clean sweep? Or are we going to see it go to the ace game? Spawning up in the top right position. Winning game number 1 with some very nice players. He represents Team Acer. MMA. And his opponent down to the lower left. The orange Protoss. Playing for my insanity. Stardust. Stardust, of course, going out in the quarterfinals of WCS EU Premier 2014. MMA, the runner-up. Both of these two, very, very good players. MMA in game 1, just getting a good build order and really catching Stardust off guard with those Widow Mines. And if Stardust hadn't have opened with that Dark Shrine, he would have been pretty safe. He should have had detection out and wouldn't have taken as much damage from the Widow Mines, but it was really the follow-up push that was devastating. Just so much stuff for MMA, such a beautiful timing with those 2 medevacs, the +1, the stim, and the combat shield. And it just sniping out that natural nexus meant there was no way Stardust could come back from it. We've got some very exciting things happening though this game, because this game Stardust has to win if he wants to get into that final, if he's got any chance of it. MMA, if he wins, guarantees himself at least 150 euros, maybe even the 300 if he's able to win tonight. Stardust, on the other hand, if he loses this game, walks away with just 75 euros. Builds from both of these two players, remarkably similar to game 1. Slight variation in what MMA has chosen to do. He hasn't got the reactor out, instead just getting the 1 Reaper earlier, and going for the engineering bay block at the natural base. This block is really frustrating. Adds quite a big bump to what the intention of Stardust was, which is just to take a quick gate expand. The SCV, trying to get killed as much as possible, while obviously trying to finish off that engineering bay as much as possible. How much you finish it doesn't make any difference to what investment you've made in doing it for the Terran, but it does take longer to kill off, and it can still be cancelled anyway. Chipping away now, this Reaper, preventing the Zealot from coming to work at that engineering bay, trying to take it down, creating a further block to the natural base timing of Stardust. A Stalker is on its way out, a Probe taking some shield damage, but only 1 Reaper, not too threatening. There's no second Reaper on the way, it is just the 1. But he's going to continue to try and stop this Zealot for as long as possible, taking out the engineering bay. Because the longer this is up, the worse Stardust economy is, and the better things are for MMA, who has already got his natural base over half done and progressing along nicely. 2 more barracks being added in. This delays the tech of MMA, but it means he has more Marines out. He'll be able to defend a bit better to inevitably a bit more pressure coming from Stardust. We know Stardust will be most likely putting on some kind of pressure or teching in some way, which is now scouted actually, that Twilight Council by the Reaper, because of the delay of the natural. He's going to have money and he's got nowhere to spend it, so it's got to go in either units or tech, because he can't expand. So MMA, just playing it a bit safer, knowing that his economy is good, wanting to make sure that he doesn't die early so he can really utilise that advantage long term. Robo and Twilight Council on the field now for Stardust. He's getting down Blink, and Yonsu is another map that's very effective with Blink plays. Not as so as Heavyweight, there isn't quite as much cliff area, but it's still fairly substantial, with lots of different ways to come in. It needs a good number of bunkers to defend all of it. So the difference here is that we are going to see the Observer come down. And the reason you need an Observer is because after the Mothership Core's vision was nerfed, or the vision radius was nerfed, it's a lot easier to snipe that off. And so getting the Observer just makes sure that you can guarantee that you can get that blink up a lot easier. Forge coming down, couple of Marines and a Marauder moving out. They're going to be looking to pressure into the natural base of Stardust, just to bait out a Photon Overcharge. Not looking to kill it. Won't be able to kill it. No medevac support, and the Photon Overcharge there would certainly stop it. But by using that Mothership Core energy early, for maybe losing 1, perhaps 2 Marines, is definitely worthwhile. MMA being very cautious at the moment. He's got a second bunker coming through. Interestingly, Stardust choosing to get out that robotics bay, so he's going to be going up into Colossus tech, which is quite surprising when he's invested early into Blink. Also going down that armor, so this isn't some kind of 2-base Blink all-in. Instead, it's a very fast tech up into later game compositions for Stardust, which is actually played into beautifully by what MMA is doing, which is being incredibly defensive. And Stardust is now scouting that out. He knows that he's fairly safe and that his opponent is expecting pressure through. He sees the 2 bunkers, sees how late the starport is, and is going to be sitting there thinking, yes, this is good. This is exactly what I want. With that block, it's giving me ample amounts of time to get out my Colossi and also my upgrades. However, MMA, he's continuing on with this very economic and late game focused play, with the 3rd command center now being placed. Stardust's observers are getting ample information about this. Does lose the observer though, with a nice scan from MMA there. And the one thing that Stardust hasn't yet seen is this 3rd CC. He needs to scout that as soon as possible, ideally, so he can note that his opponent is getting that great economy, but also won't be able to apply pressure immediately or in the near future of a substantial amount. There will inevitably be a little bit of poking and some prodding with the kind of 2 medevac army that's frequently seen harassing Protoss and Zerg players. It always comes out this push. He'll be synced up with +1 and Combat Shield and Stim, just as we saw in map number 1. The big difference though is that this game Stardust has the Colossus there. That Colossus, huge amount of splash, a lot of damage output, means that in theory Stardust should be safe. He can even actually start pressuring into this. The concern for Stardust has to be the lack of extended thermal lance, because that allows these Marauders to max the Colossus's range, and while there's only 1, it's vulnerable to just getting sniped down. And if that's dead, the gateway units are left vulnerable to the Stim Marine Marauders. They won't trade well. More scans coming down, MMA just being very aware of where and when his opponent is positioning his army, so he can appropriately defend against it. This would be a nice engagement position for Stardust. He'll be able to get some good shots off. Got about another 20 seconds until extended thermal lance is done, but also now has that second Colossus. The Viking count really low, as this will have caught MMA slightly off guard. And with this greedy play, is having to lift up this 3rd orbital command, which is taking a surprising amount of damage now. The Colossi do need to be quite careful not to go too far forward with the Marauders there, but as they've got extended thermal lance, now outrange the infantry, and their primary threat comes in the form of those Vikings. But by forcing MMA to pump Vikings so early, there's only 2 medevacs. That makes Stim a luxury. It makes the splash damage from the Colossi all the more devastating. And MMA really needs to make sure that he doesn't overcommit to any engagements, if at all avoidable. CC floating down, or looking to get ready to float back down, whereas Stardust just trying to find any avenues, making sure nothing sneaky is happening, no additional bases have been taken. Important thing for Stardust is to take his 3rd base now, and that's exactly what he's doing. Pulling this probe down, going to secure up that Nexus while getting charge and also the +2 ground armor. So upgrade lead is definitely on Stardust's side. These Stalkers though being exceptionally aggressive, blink forward, a couple of dead Terran units, nothing lost on Stardust's side, and this is a much closer game. My only concern for Stardust is this Viking count is rapidly becoming scary. 8 Vikings down on the field. Once there's about 10-12, these Colossi will be in a bit of trouble. But there's 4 of them. There's a lot of Zealots, they've got charge, they've got the 1-1 upgrades, or Charge isn't actually yet kicked in, but they'll soon have charge, and the Stalker count's fairly good. So the Vikings can still get taken down pretty effectively. No third base yet from Stardust. He's just hit the 400 minerals, so should be able to produce it any moment now. And with that coming down, if it does come down, Stardust has got a later game plan. The longer this goes on though, with only Colossi here, the better things get for MMA. He's got the third base, he's got the 3 mules, and he's also got the SCV lead. Stardust knows that though, blinks forward, takes out 2 of these Vikings early. The Zealots have to close down the distance. +2 ground armor, not yet completed, but regardless, MMA pulling back. A couple of those Marauders get sniped down, but Stardust not overcommitting. This third base needs to be taken out. If it stays up, it's a lot of income for MMA. MMA looking to try and find some avenue to engage it, but with the Stalkers there, it's going to be tough. The Zealots now moving in. One of the Colossus falls. The Viking count very high, up at 9. Slaughtering a lot of those Colossi. The Stalkers on the ground getting some good damage down onto the Vikings, while the Zealots soak up the damage from the bio. 3 of the Colossi remain. MMA taking significant losses. 2 Colossi still up, and all the Vikings gone. GG, and Stardust takes this game and levels out the series to 1-1. That means we get the ace game, and things get ultra tense.